Hello friends, it's Kristie Marcotte. Spellbinders has a fun new Christmas release called Christmas Traditions. They have several different items in the release. I chose 3 things to use for my cards. First, I have their Christmas Tradition 6x6 paper pad. It's a beautiful collection, lots of gold foil detail. There's 24 sheets, all single-sided designs. Next, I have the 3 Kings stamp set. This is a great stamp set with some good silhouette images and Christian sentiments. I also chose Christmas time sentiments. I love having a good variety of Christmas sentiments for my cards. So let's go ahead and get started with card design number 1. I'm using a card sketch for inspiration from MFT. This is number 547. I have this fun, colorful polka dot paper for the background. It has some of the gold foil detail on there. I decided to round the bottom 2 corners, and I'll layer this on some red cardstock. I chose another pattern paper. It's a red tone-on-tone pattern. I cut a 1 3/4 inch strip, and then for that top portion, on the sketch I have it listed at 3 inches, but for this card I decided to lengthen that so it's 3.5 inches. Then the 3 strips that go underneath that panel are 3/8 of an inch. Just using some Barely Art liquid glue to adhere all of these in place. All of my cards in this video are American Standard A2 size, so 4 1/4 inches by 5.5 inches. And if you are interested in the sketch that I'm showing, I do share that information on my coordinating blog post. That link is provided in the description box below, or you can simply head over to KristieMarcotte.com. For this sentiment, I'll be using Wishing You Peace and Joy, and I'm stamping it on some light teal cardstock. I'm using the Aquatini color by Catherine Pooler. Just ink it up a few times. Then I'll trim the sentiment down. It's about 7/8 of an inch by 2.5 inches. I'll cut a fishtail on both ends. I'm sure I have a banner die I could use instead, but I find it quicker to just use my scissors and cut those fishtails myself. I decided I will pop up the sentiment. I'm using some thin foam squares. Just make sure to get good coverage so there isn't one area that sags, and I'll be adhering it right above those 3 thin strips. I want to leave enough room above the sentiment to add a die cut image. I'm using Spellbinders Bottle Brush Tree die set. This is not from their Christmas Traditions release, but it was released earlier this year. I thought it looked so fun. I have the background cut out of some darker teal cardstock, and then the branch portion I used some pearlescent cardstock. It's actually the opposite side of that background piece. Putting some liquid adhesive on all of those branches. I don't need to cover every drop, but I'm trying to make sure there's enough so the branches won't lift up. And then I'll just layer those 2 pieces together. I used 2 different brown cardstocks for the little wood slice, and then I'll glue the tree right on top. This is the larger size. There's also a smaller size of the trees included in the die set. I'll put some foam dimension on the back. I won't put any of the foam dimension on the back of the wood slice. Instead, I'll put some liquid adhesive since it'll sit right on top of that sentiment banner. I used some gold mirror cardstock that was left over from Spellbinders' September kit, cut out 3 small circles and also the tiny star. So I'll put the star on the top of the tree, and I'm using the 3 small circles as embellishment. And before I adhere those in place, I decided to add some twine underneath the sentiment. And this is just twine I've had on hand for years. I cut out 2 pieces and tied a double bow. Trim off the tails and then adhere it to the card using a small glue dot. I'll place it right between 2 of those thin strips in the center underneath the sentiment. So once I have that in place, I can add those 3 small circles. I'll place 2 of them to the left of the tree and 1 to the right. I'm using an embellishment wand to pick those up, adding a drop of liquid adhesive and pressing those in place. So there is my finished card, and I did make 2 using this design. It's harder to see in the photo, but I love the gold foil detail on that background pattern paper. It's so pretty. Now moving on to card design number 2, I have 2 different pattern papers. I'm using the gold foil diagonal stripe paper for the background, and then I have this beautiful poinsettia paper that I'm layering on some dark green cardstock. Put some ATG tape on the back and adhere those two pieces together. Even though there's about 1/4 of an inch border from that gold foil paper in the background, it's still super shiny. I decided to extend some of those stripes by using From Lizi peel-offs. These are the clear gold mirror color in the pinstripe style, and I'm adding them on the poinsettia paper, trying to follow along with just a few of the stripes. I'm using my craft knife to trim off the end so it matches perfectly with the edge of that poinsettia pattern paper. I end up adding 5 of those stripes going along the background. This card will be super shiny with all that gold foil detail. I didn't measure between each of those peel-off stripes, really wanted to go for more of a random look. So some of it's probably about 1.5 inches and others maybe 3/4 of an inch. So my final piece, just trimming off those ends. Now you can see all that beautiful shine. Isn't that fun? I'll put some ATG tape on the back and adhere my card front onto a card base. And for this card, I won't have a cardstock layer for the very background. Next, I'll be using Spellbinders Essential Labels die set. It has the outline and also the piece to add the little tiny circle detail. So I'll be using 2 of those. I already have them cut out, and I'll be stamping the sentiment inside this box. This is wishing you a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. I use Catherine Pooler's spruce colored ink. I stamped the sentiment on some shimmer cardstock, so it is still wet. I decided to do some heat embossing using some clear embossing powder. That way it'll add that extra detail and the ink won't smudge on that cardstock. So once that is all heat set, I wanted to add a little bit of shine behind all of those circles. I used the same die, cut out a second piece from some gold mirror cardstock, then I'll adhere the 2 pieces together. I put a little bit of ATG tape on the back and also some liquid adhesive along that outside edge. Since I'm adhering a pearlescent cardstock to a gold mirror cardstock, I want to make sure they're going to stay together. Now you can see all that lovely gold foil detail through the teeny tiny holes. And I know my light just picks up all of that specialty cardstock. To adhere to the card, I'll use some more liquid adhesive. Just put it in the very center. And I know it's a little sad to cover up some of that beautiful poinsettia paper, but you can still see quite a bit around the sentiment. Next, I'll add some small flowers using Spellbinders Mini Fall Bloom set. This is not from their Christmas Traditions release. It was from a previous release, but I thought the flowers were the perfect size. I've already cut out all of the pieces. There's 2 different sizes of the flowers. There's the stem with the berries. So I'll be adding the berries onto that little green stem, using my embellishment one to help pick up all of those tiny pieces. And then I also have the tiny little center for the flowers. For the larger flower, I'll be layering the 2 pieces together. Then I also cut out some extra leaves and I'll be tucking those into the arrangement. So in the upper left-hand corner, I'm adding 1 flower and 2 of the little sprigs with the berries. In the lower right-hand corner, I'll add 2 of the flowers and 1 of the sprigs with the berries. For this card, I decided not to add any foam dimension. It's nice to have some Christmas cards that don't have all that thickness, so I can mail them without paying any additional postage. I'm just going to tuck in those 2 single leaves on the left side of this larger flower. Then to finish off the card, I'll be using Nuvo's glitter drops in the red sunstone color, adding it to all of the little berries. So once that dries, it'll have this beautiful sparkle. And there is my finished card. I love how this turned out. There's lots of sparkle and shine. And again, I did make 2 using this design. I love making multiple cards, especially when I'm using pattern paper. For card design number 3, now I won't be using any pattern paper for this card. Instead, I'll be doing some ink blending on the background. I have Distress Oxide ink prize ribbon for the first color, adding it to the top portion of this background piece. I recently purchased this ink stand for my Distress Oxide inks and I love it. It has little grips on the bottom, so when you're inking up your blender brush, it doesn't move. And you can have two hands to do your inking and not have to hold your ink pad. For the lower portion of this panel, I'm using the tea dye color. I'm creating a scene for my card, so I have the sand and the sky. Next, I'll use the largest die from the Essential Labels die set. Cut out this panel. I have the stamps all set in my mini MISTI, some of the palm trees, I have the sentiment Peace on Earth, and also some of the palace, or maybe it's just the city buildings. I'm using intense black ink from Honeybee Stamps, and I do ink it up several times to get a nice solid impression. Then I decided to add one more set of the palm trees. So once that's all inked up, I'll reposition the palm trees and stamp it to the right of that first set. So it'll be a little more in front as well. Next, I'll be adding the Christmas star up in the sky. I'm using some metallic gold ink from scrapbook.com. And I do need to ink this one up several times. Using that same metallic gold ink, I'm going to stamp some of it on an acrylic block. I'll spritz it with some water, doing that off screen. Then I'll take a paintbrush, get it nice and wet, and then just tap it over my card panel to give a beautiful gold splatter on the background. Once that panel is all dry, I'll add it onto a cardstock layer. And I decided to use some black pearlescent cardstock. I'll put some ATG tape on the back of this piece, add it to my card base. Then I'll use some liquid adhesive, add it to the back of this panel, and adhere this piece onto my card front. The nice thing about using liquid adhesive is you have a little bit of wiggle room while you're trying to get everything nice and straight. So there is my finished card. I also decided to keep this one nice and flat, and I did make two using this design. I think this is an easy enough card to make multiples. Just ink up some backgrounds, have your stamps all set in your MISTI, and stamp away. Now here's another look at the 6 cards I made using Spellbinders' brand new Christmas Traditions release. They have so many fun new products in this release. If you are interested, I do have links provided in the description box below. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.